Hey folks, this is Vince with Ads Gaming Addiction, and today we're going to quickly check out Tumult Royale. From my understanding, the word tumult means a loud, confused noise emitted by a large group of people or something like that. So basically, a lot of upset people, which doesn't surprise me because this game puts players in the shoes of royals, and their goal is to erect all of these statues everywhere they can, and the player that can get the most statues will earn the most points and win the game. But in order to build these statues, they have to acquire resources, and I say acquire, or tax, or steal resources from these common folk, and stealing too much or being too greedy will net you in a bit of trouble. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the components and see how the game is played. Okay, so before we begin, it's worth noting that game setup will vary depending on how many people are playing the game. For example, you've got this board here, and as you can see, it sort of lifts up, and there's little modular boards here that fit inside of it, sort of like in Settlers of Catan. You can even extend this board further out. Like, the way it's set up right now is for a 2-player game, but if you want to play 3 or 4 players, you have to extend this out further and move this bottom piece down so that it can accommodate more of these terrain tiles. But for right now, I mean, we don't need them because we're only using a 2-player example here. So you're going to go ahead and set up the board like this. You're going to have other terrain tiles that you can shuffle up and then put 2 face up like this, 2 face down like this. Again, setup will vary depending on how many people are playing. You've also got a little bit of a scoreboard up here. As rounds continue, players will be placing a statue of themselves up here, showing themselves as being crowned king for that particular round, and that will factor into endgame scoring. You've also got this spinner here. This determines how many resources of each good that the people demand be left over once all of the royals are done taking resources. And this will all make sense to you once we actually go through a round so you can see what's going on. You've also got these castle boards. Each player gets a castle board. They also get the statues of their color. Now, again, I'm being lazy here. Rather than having to pick out all of the blue statue pieces from the bag, I only picked out 5, but all of these should be filled up here. And of course, there's the other 3 colors in the game too: yellow, gray, and purple. And likewise, there's also a yellow, gray, and purple castle board as well. You've also got a bunch of these tiles here. They have white borders around them, black and gray borders. Again, depending on how many people are playing the game, will determine which ones you use. In the 2-player game, you're only going to use these white bordered tiles. The black bordered ones and the gray bordered ones go back in the box. And again, the manual will tell you all of that stuff, so I don't want to delve too deeply into the specifics here. You've also got these supporter tokens. They sort of act like currency. Players will be able to earn or lose these throughout the game, depending on certain situations. You also got these nobility cards, and these are given out to players at random at the beginning of the game, and that basically determines their hierarchy. And in ties and stuff like that, like let's say there's a tie for whoever's the most greedy, the person with the highest nobility is the target and breaks all the ties. So that's being up there is a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing. So I'll get into more of that later. But each player gets one of these nobility cards. Again, depending on how many people are playing, you're only going to use so many. There is a total of 4 different nobility cards. You've got the king, you've got the duke, you've got the prince and the earl, and on the reverse side is just the feminine version of that. So you can flip it to any side you want to. But in a 2-player game, you're only going to use 2 tiles, and then each player is going to have one. They're going to switch hands throughout the game depending on the circumstances. You've also got a sand timer here, and at the very beginning of the game, whoever has the king, or the number 1 here, will get the timer and this. The next thing that'll happen is people will also get one of these, the People Show Mercy tiles. You're just going to flip that to the People Show No Mercy side, okay? And then after that, starting with the last player, not the king, but the lowest ranked player, they're going to go ahead and take one of their statues and put it onto one of these pasture tiles, which are these light green spaces here. And then in order from lowest rank to highest rank, so the king will go last, so he'll go ahead and put a statue on, again, on a pasture space. And that pretty much concludes game setup. I may have missed a step or two, but that's the gist of it. So the game is played over a series of rounds, and each round has 7 phases. The first phase is gauge the people's sentiment, and basically that involves the king spinning the spinner and announcing the number. And this number determines how many resources of each type, you've got bread, stone, and tools, how many of each type the people want during this round. The second phase involves the collection of taxes. Before any taxes are collected, which means just taking tiles from here to collect resources, each player will remove 3 tiles face down from this central pool. So let's just say I take these 3, put them off to the side for the time being, and, well, that's a bad place to put it, I'm out of room. All right. And then 1, 2, 3, and then let's just say my opponent does this. Okay. All right, now from here, the timer is flipped, and every player, well in this case just us 2, our imaginary friend here and I, will have 20 seconds to peek with these with one hand and then take the ones that we want, putting them face down into our castle. So I want that one, again you have to do this with one hand, I'll take that one, and I'll take that one, okay, and let's say my opponent takes this, he's greedy. Let's just say he takes all of these and puts them on his board over here somewhere, okay. And then the time runs out, and then that's it. The third phase is resolve potential tumults. This is where you actually check to see if you have enough resources to make the people happy left over in this pool over here. So let's go ahead and flip them over and see what we got. Alright, so the magic number here was 3. So we need 3 bread, 3 stone, and 3 tools. Well, just in looking at this, we've got a problem. We've got enough bread to keep the people happy. However, there's only 2 stone and 1 tool. That is not enough. So there's going to be 2 tumults here for this particular round. 1 for stone and 1 for tools. So now players will compare how much they took of each commodity type for that particular commodity. So we'll start with stone first. Let's see how many I took of stone. I took 3 stone, okay, and my opponent took 4 stone, okay, so he was the most greedy out of the 2 of us, so he is the one that the people are going to be after right now. Now, if you had this, the People Show Mercy card on the green side, then you could subtract 1 from the number of each commodity type you have stolen, but at the very beginning of the game, you start with this side up, Show No Mercy, so that has no effect right now. That'll come into play later, though. But getting back to the stone thing, this opponent stole more stone than me, so what ends up happening here is that he has to give back all of his stone except for his lowest valued one. So if he had, in this case, he has 2 of these stone tiles. They both depict 2, so it doesn't matter which one he gives back. But let's say he had like something like that. He'd have to give back this 2, and he'd have to give back this 2, and then keep this 1. He'd only be able to keep 1 tile of that commodity of whatever the lowest value would be. So, yeah, let me just give this back to him here. Alright, and then he'd also lose some supporters, which is not a good thing. So he'd end up losing some of these supporters here. Okay, so apologies about the cut. My son actually just walked through the door home from school, so I had to go deal with that. But anyway, getting back to this, not only does the greedy player have to give back all of his commodities of that type, except for the lowest valued one, he also has to give up 3 of his supporters to the bank. Now, that was just 1 commodity. Now we're going to take a look at tools, because we determined that bread was okay, because the magic number was 3, and there's 4 bread over there. But tools, there's only 1 tool left for the people, and they're mad about that too. So who took the most tools? Well, I took 3. My opponent over here took 4. So again, he's going to be the target of the people's wrath. So he has to give back all of his tools except for the lowest ranked one. So he has to give this back here. And he also loses 3 more supporters. And then once all of the commodities are checked and the tumults are resolved, we'll move on to the next phase, or the place statues phase. Alright, so with regard to building statues, this is how players will win the game. They're going to be spending these resources to put these little statues from their little castle board onto the board up here. Now, depending on where you put it, though, it'll cost you something different. These green, or these light green terrain tiles are pastures, and they're the cheapest. It's just 1 bread and 1 stone. Whereas the forests, a little bit more. You've got bread, stone, and tools, and then you've got mountains. That costs 1 bread, bread, 1 stone, and 2 tools, and so on and so forth. Now, what's cool is that the last 2 here, even though they cost a lot, you can actually put 2 or 3 statues on those spaces. On the, I think it's a city here, you can put 2 meeples on it, just for that one cost. You don't have to pay each for each statue. You just pay the cost here, and then you can put 2 statues on that space. And again, the more statues you have, the better. Alternatively, if there's a castle on your board, which there is one on the very top, but you guys can't see it because I've zoomed in here, you could put 3 of your statues on that space after paying the cost. Now, there's also something I want to quickly note about the play statues phase. Now, I mentioned earlier that players can lose supporters by being too greedy. Well, you can actually gain supporters back by doing one of 2 things during this phase. If you don't build any statues at all, you get 2 supporters from the bank automatically. If you overpay, let's say you put a statue down and you overpay, meaning, let's say that this statue, putting a statue on this pasture here, costs 1 bread and 1 stone. I have a bread tile, but it has 2 on it, not 1. So I'd be overpaying 1 bread just so I could build the statue. Well, for every commodity that you overpay that way, you get 1 extra supporter. So getting supporters back is a great way of securing your nobility, because you'll be redistributing ranks during the 5th phase. Now, the 5th and 6th phase are, for the most part, they run into each other. The 5th phase simply means redistributing ranks, so these cards will be changing hands based on how many supporters they have. Whoever has the most supporters will get the king tile, or if you're playing with the female version, the queen tile. The second person, or the person that has the second most supporters, will get either the duke or the duchess, depending on what side you have it flipped to, and so on and so forth. After that, whoever is crowned king will get to place one of their statues, the leftmost statue from their kingdom board, and put it up here onto this little score track up here. And then, as you can see, as rounds continue, people will be adding more of their statues to this score track. And that's actually important because, again, the more statues you have out in play on the board and up here, the more likely it is that you'll win the game. Now, whenever you do become king, by the way, you do have to give up 5 supporters. So you'll have to give up 5 supporters to the bank. This way, you know, there's a greater chance that you will be, I don't know, pushed back a notch, I suppose, you know, during the next round, assuming that your opponent doesn't screw up too much and piss the people off even more. Last but not least, we have the Receive the People's Mercy phase. And basically all this entails whoever has the fewest statues in play will receive the People's Mercy. They can flip it over to the green side. This basically allows them to steal a little bit more for that next round and still get away with it. But I mean, you could still be greedy or be you know, classified as greedy if you end up taking too much. But again, having the People's Mercy means that you get to subtract 1 from the number of each type of commodity you have stolen. So it lessens your risk of being the one that is the most greedy. That's pretty much all there is to it. The rounds will continue over and over again until the victory condition is met. For a victory condition to be met, basically, again, players are going to be adding these statues along the top as rounds progress. Oh, by the way, whenever you get to these spaces here, there's a little flip tile space. Whenever you get to that space, you can actually choose a terrain tile to flip over, assuming I can actually do it. And then you'll have more land with which to work, and the same thing with that other tile down here. Now, getting back to this, though, to get to the end of the game, what's going to happen is eventually you're going to complete so many rounds to the point where you get to these smaller numbers down here, 7, 5, 3. And at the end of every round, you're going to take a look and see, okay, who has the most statues on the board? Let's say it was blue. Let's say that blue had, I don't know, 20 statues from up here and on the board, and it was just 20 statues, even number. And let's say yellow had the least number of statues. You're going to find the person with the least number of statues, sum up their statues. Let's say he had between this and this, let's say he had something like 12. So you're going to subtract those 2 numbers. 20 minus 12 is 8. Is 8 greater than the number shown here for that round? If the answer is yes, then the game is over. So if it's basically, you know, if you're winning by a landslide, then there's no point in continuing. The game is over. And whoever has, obviously, the most would have won the game. Alright, and there you have it, a quick look at Tumult Royale. It's important to stress that I did not cover all of the rules found in the manual. This was just to give you a general overview so that you could see how the game was played. For example, I think I missed the game specifics here. Usually I read these out to you in the opening. It's for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, and the average play time is 40 minutes. So apologies, I missed that in the opening. What did I think of Tumult Royale? Well, honestly, I like this one for a number of reasons. It's got a push your luck element to it, in the sense that you're trying to get as many resources as you can to build as many statues as you can. However, you have to be careful because, you know, taking too much will obviously be a bad thing. Whenever you spin this spinner here, it'll tell you what the number is of resources that people will require. So you're going to think to yourself, okay, a 5 was just spun, so are my opponents going to be conservative in their... Are they going to be conservative in what they take, or are they going to be greedy as hell, in which case I'll be greedy too, but not as much as them. Like, you sort of have to play a mind game with your opponents and try and figure out how much they're going to take. And I do like the fact that you can only look at these one at a time with one hand. It's not like you can sit there with both hands, rummage through these, and keep a running tally every 2 seconds. Now, you only have one hand, and there's a specific way to go about looking at these tiles, putting them back or putting them into your personal castle. So you sort of have to play a mind game with your opponents and try and figure out what it is they're taking based on where they are on the board. Because if you look on where they are on the board, you can see what they're adjacent to. And then you can look at your castle and say, okay, well, they need stone to build it. They need, they need bread and they need stone to build on that particular terrain. So I bet you that's what they're going after. And since a 5 was spun on this board here, maybe I could take I can take a little bit of bread or a little bit of stone, which is what they're going to be taking a lot of, just to ensure that the people revolt because they didn't have enough left over, and then he'll get their wrath is what it is. So you can sort of try and play the numbers game a bit and try and manipulate the pool, the end result of the pool, to work in your favor if you're sneaky enough and if you're good enough. Of course, it's a push your luck, so sometimes it may not work. But there is also, one thing I do like is a balance in this game. Like, every time you're crowned king, you have to give up 5 supporters to the bank. And as we know, supporters is what determines whether or not you are crowned king in the following round. So, unless your opponents really screw up and piss off the people on a regular basis, thereby losing supporters themselves, the role of king will be changing hands. Getting supporters is incredibly difficult. It's because, A, in order to get supporters at all, you either have to not build any statues, which is definitely not going to help you in the end. You need statues to win the game, or by overpaying on your resources. And that can be a bad thing, especially when, you know, you've got a lot of resources that you plan to use to build more statues, but, you know, if you give up some of those resources just for the sake of ensuring your kingdom, or, well, kingdom, for the, you know, for that round, then, you know, that's sort of a give and take that you're sacrificing. So, I mean, there's a little bit of strategy in this game, push your luck, a little area control, because, again, there is a board, modular board, and no game is going to be the same twice, because, you know, these modular boards rotate, and there's more in the box, and it's, honestly, all of it's really cool. So, if you like push your luck / strategy games, and / resource management games, go check this one out. It's pretty good. If you guys want to see my full review, you can. www.dadsgamingaddiction.com. If you haven't already, subscribed to my YouTube channel. That way you can keep up to date with any new content I happen to publish. This is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.